translations. I understand that, by the way. Everyone understand it? Okay. So let's look at a couple more translations. Slide 2 and 3. Let's look at those. I think there is the translation. Look at the first one. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. Or we can take nothing out of it. That's one translation. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. Looks pretty similar to me. Third translation. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. Looks pretty similar to me. Next slide. For we have brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of it either. They added either to it. Yeah, and then the next one says, after all. So they have to look, after all, they added that to it. We brought nothing in with us, and we came into the world, and we cannot take anything with us when we leave it. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot carry anything out. Those are 6 different translations. Very similar. So I looked to see if I was missing something. Is this verse so easy that I'm missing something? So when someone asks you today, what did the preacher preach about? You're simply going to say, you brought nothing in, and you can't take nothing. Sometimes you go home and they ask you what the preacher preached about. You say, I know it was good, but I don't know what he preached about. Am I right about it? And so the translations are good. If the length of this sermon, here's a question for everyone. If the length of this sermon was based on you understanding 1 Timothy 6:7, how long would this sermon last? I heard that. I heard 5 minutes. Are we ready to take communion and give now? Somebody said, amen. So y'all agree with that. Like, wait. Let's don't move too. But the length, it may be the shortest sermon ever delivered at 5701 East MLK. It might be. Everyone understand it? You brought nothing in. You won't take anything out. And so some things are simple to understand, but here's what adds time to the sermon. We act like we don't understand. It's not a matter of understanding, we just act like. Have you ever had someone that act like? Parents, has your child ever acted like they didn't understand? Clean the room. An hour later. Is that difficult to understand? You right here on 35. You know what the speed limit is. You pass by there every day. And you got Brother Alexander there and Brother Charles Edwards too. He stops you and you act like. Mike and Charles probably would tell you, very few people say, yeah, I knew what the speed limit was. I was going to go there. But most people just, I'm shocked. You saw, and even on 130 going to San Antonio, 80. I've seen people stop on 130. And the speed limit is 80 miles an hour. And they say, I didn't understand. It's not that we don't understand, we act like. So if this verse seems familiar to you, maybe you read Job 121, where Job says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I depart. Or maybe you read Psalms 49:17, where it says, for when he died, he shall carry nothing away. And by the way, even if you could carry something away, you couldn't use it. I need to come down here. I mean, I'm going to come right here. You all remember the S&H green stamps. The folk that were born like in the baby boomers remember this. The young folk looking like, what is an S&H green stamp? Your parents will tell you. But the baby boomers remember that. And you could tell when somebody had gone to the store and they had some S&H green stamp, because when you went over, knocked on the door and started talking, their tongue was green. And it wasn't from now and laters. They've been licking those stamps and they've been it would be like taking an S&H, you found an S&H green stamp book and you took it down to HEB. And you say, I want to redeem this book. What would they think of you? Well, you say, well, they didn't do it. I'm going to take it to Walmart. Sam Walton is good. He will do it. See, you can have a book, but you cannot use it. So even if you could take some things with you, you can't use it. So now, I think it's proper, because we're talking about coming into the world with nothing and leaving, but in between there is life. So I looked up some things about what people thought were important in life. What would make a successful life? So let's look at a couple slides and then we're going to move on and get into an interesting story. So someone said, you know, life would be better if you could do this right here. If you could simply fix yourself. What do y'all think about that? I think that when I fly all the time, they always do an emergency announcement. In case of an emergency, they say this air mask will drop from the ceiling. And then they always tell you to put it on yourself. Why do they tell me to put it on myself first? See, if you're incapacitated, so I'm thinking for us in life, we need to start putting our air mask on first. You can't help anyone else if you're not fixed. So they say fix yourself first. Secondly, the Bible says on the next slide, rather the idea of what makes life, wisely choose who you spend your time with because they will influence you. Hey, that's true, by the way. That is true. People will influence you. You think you're doing the influencing? See, I didn't know for a long time. My nephew came and stayed with me for a month. And he would be around me every day. And what I did know, every time I would drink water, I would say, that's still the best drink in town. And one day, he was drinking some water, and I heard him tell another child, that's still the best drink in town. Social media will influence you. I didn't know for a long time why I was not playing basketball in the 7th grade. My coach had me on the bench. Well, the New York Knicks had a basketball player named Earl. Some of y'all are old just like me. I like that. His name was Earl the Pearl. Oh, Earl the Pearl. I would watch the games. We didn't have color TV back then. So I'm going way back. So Earl the Pearl would come down. Oh, he was smooth. He would dribble the ball, and then he had a double pump jump shot. I started watching him 7th grade, and guess what? He influenced me. I got on the court trying to do what Earl, and I sit on the bench my 7th grade year looking at Earl the Pearl Monroe. People will influence you in the wrong way sometimes. That's true. Next slide. This says when people show you who they are, believe them. Maya Angelou. Now, I'm retired now, and I do watch some TV. So I have no problem with being retired. I can watch TV all day. I'm just What we say in here stays in here. I see some sisters pointing at their husbands. Okay, so there's a show on, I think TV One says, For My Man. Now, I wish someone else would come up here and explain that show. When people show you who they are, believe. See, this show, the premise is some women will do anything for their man. There are thousands of women in prison, in trouble today because, now I'm looking at the sisters here, they said, I won't be in no prison, no jail, anything. I got you. Y'all are, so brothers, if you, they're not going to do it. But when people show you early on who they are, believe them. Don't try, sometimes we're always trying to change people. And we're always making excuses for them. Whenever you have to explain what someone said over and over, there's something wrong with that. They come out and say something, and then you up there trying to interpret what they said. There's something wrong with that. We see it every day. Well, they didn't say that. Well, yeah, they did say that. You can't convince. Who are you then? Why are you trying to? They said that. Well, they didn't mean it. Yeah, they meant that. I've had people say things to me. They meant it. Now, they can say they're sorry, but they weren't sorry. They said it. At the time, they weren't. I'm sorry. Well, okay, I accept that apology. When people show you who they are, believe them. Next slide. Be more interested in what others people have to say than what you have to say. Now, this is where you have to become a professional listener. Some of you all could be psychiatrists. You could actually be a psychiatrist. And others could not be. Because you know, when your profession is a psychiatrist, you bring people in. And I heard, now I don't know about this, I heard you lay on the couch. Y'all don't have to tell me this. Now, I just heard that you lay on the couch and you tell them about your problems. The reason some of you all couldn't be psychiatrists is because you wouldn't let them finish telling you about the problem. You would jump in with the solution. No. You get paid to listen. And you know, believe it or not, some people will talk through their problems. They'll come through the solution. That's how it works. Be more interested in what other people have to say. I've got to say this. I've got to get this out. Look, I've been in Sunday school, and there was a comment, and the teacher says the bell has sounded. I've got to, and it's a good comment too. And sometimes I feel like I've got to say this. Well, maybe I don't. I don't have to have the last word. You could solve a lot of arguments at home, by the way. Some of you all probably argued when you came to church. And you didn't put a period there, you put a comma. Yeah, you put a comma there. Oh, that was a good argument, by the way. You put that comma there, and you waiting for me to finish so you could get out of here and drive and continue, so you want to have that last word. Go ahead and put a period, y'all. Put a period. Next slide. Let's go. There's a difference between feeling better and getting better. The way you get better is to cast all your cares. That's how you get better. You got to cast them on someone who can handle them. There is a difference. Next slide. Always be reading a book that you don't want to put down. Now, when I saw this, I was thinking, what book should I read? In leadership class, they give you all these books, from good to great. Leadership in a Minute. Read all these books. I started reading this book, and it fit that description. It's a book that I could not hardly put down. Found myself reading it late at night. And the title is After the Cheering Stops. Name of the book. An NFL's wife's story of concussions, loss, and the faith that saw her through. And the reason I couldn't put it down is because I played football with this guy at Abilene Christian. And he died. And so I started reading the book. But then I thought, well, what other book do I need to read? Well, there's a book that you should always be reading and never want to put down. See, I'm telling you. See, I'm reading this. I got the lesson first. And I say, I'm sitting here. This is the book. But there's a question, though. When was the last time you started reading and couldn't put it down? No, don't raise your hand back there. No, I didn't mean that now. Don't raise hands. But here's the book that we're talking about. Next slide. Because we're moving right through. Continually work to reduce the things that irritate you. Scale down your irritation list. Some people are always agitated, irritated. Always mad and upset. Scale down that list. Scale it down. Life will be better for you. Next slide. If you have a job you dread, find another job and quit the one you dread. Now, I had a job one time, and I worked on it 35 years. Oh, I thought that was something. And then I went to Washington, and I met a lady that had the same job, and she had worked on it 60 straight years. 60! You hear me in the back? She worked on the job 60 straight years. And I say, well, wait a minute. I thought 35. When I said 35, I was straightening my tie, getting ready. She said, well, you just a baby, young man. Look, I have vested 35. She said, I've been working 60. It humbled me. And I say, well, look, I'm always looking to learn something. Now, I'm not looking to work 60 straight years, but I'm looking to learn something. So I say, well, ma'am, how did you, first of all, what do you do? And she says, I deal with mad and angry people every day. So I never wanted to deal with mad and angry people. But she said, that's what I do. They're mad, they're angry, they're upset. And I said, well, where do you live? She said, I live in Detroit, Michigan. I've been to Detroit. You can get some mad people. You can get some mad people in Austin. And then I say, well, how do you do 60 years? She said, look, when people come in mad, upset, I explain everything, they leave happy. I'm serving people. See, here's the key. You have to get a job where you feel like you're serving people. You're adding value. You want life better? This says just says if you have a job. But I like what it says. First of all, it says find another job before you quit. I've known people, I've tried to talk a few people out of quitting. Well, I'm mad, I'm upset. And I say, well, just go home. No, I'm quitting. Here's my 52 right here. Signed off on it. And lo and behold, when the checks stop coming in, have you applied for any jobs lately, anyone? When I retired, I started applying for jobs, and they don't even call you back. I say, well, I know I'm qualified. I know it. Matter of fact, I'm overqualified. You missing out on me. They don't write you, they don't call you. Every once in a while, they'll send you an email and say, we appreciate you, but the job has been filled. I've worked 35 years. So don't quit your job until you find, because when you start applying, you might be like me. They might not pick you up, by the way. Next slide, we're almost through here. Leave something unsaid every day. There would be a lot of people possibly here today alive if they had listened to that. If they had listened leave something unsaid, they would be alive today. The fact that they didn't leave something unsaid, they're not here. That's good advice. Next slide. It says now, and having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. You want a happy life? Listen to what Paul says. And it's the next verse after verse 7. This is verse 8. Paul says, if you have food and raiment, you need to be happy, church. It's what you need to be. But so many times, that's not enough for us. It's just not enough. And so, back to verse 7 says, you brought nothing in, you can take nothing out. Now, we're going to read just a little bit, and then we're going to let you go home so you can tell everyone what the sermon was about. We got to let you do that before you forget. You can't take anything out. It reminds me of the story, and you all have heard it before, where a man and woman were married, and somebody said yes. They don't even want to hear this. They're ready to go home and tell somebody about what they heard in church today. But they were married, and they signed a prenuptial agreement. I never had anything worth a prenuptial agreement. For what? Some of you all have assets, and you want to protect those assets. But the man and woman signed a prenuptial agreement, and the man said, hey, here's one request. If I die before you die, I want you to bury all my money with me. And time went on, and sure enough, the man died before the woman. And now she said, I'm going to have to honor this prenuptial agreement. I'm going to have to bury all my husband's money with him. And so, funeral proceeded. About a week later, a relative called her and said, hey, did you really bury all your husband's money with him? And she said, well, yeah, that was part of the prenuptial agreement, and I buried all the money with him. And then the relative said, well, what was the hardest part? And she said, the hardest part was when I had to write the check and put it in the casket. And so, even if you took it with you, you can't use it. And so as we move on, just quickly, if you don't mind, 2 Kings chapter 5. We're going to look at a quick story about acting as if you don't understand. Acting as if you don't. Now, you all maybe are very familiar with the first part of this story. And so if you don't mind, let's read through and then we'll get you out of here in just a minute. So 2 Kings chapter 5, the Bible says, now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover from his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed. And he took with him 10 talents of silver, 6 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. Remember that, what he took with him, by the way. He's not going empty-handed. He's taking something with him. And verse number 6 says, and he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. Verse number 8 says, and it was so, when Elijah the man of God had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hadst thou rent thy clothes? Let him come unto me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elijah sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away and said, Behold, I thought he would surely come out. He would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abner and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the rivers in Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do something great, wouldn't thou not have done it? How much rather then when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Verse 14 says, Then he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Hallelujah, amen. Because he was healed. You all remember that part of the story, right? Naaman, he was healed. Now, that's the part I remember. But now there's another part of this. What we're talking about is when you're acting like you don't understand. Verse number 15. Look at 15. It says, now this is after Naaman was healed of leprosy. Verse 15 says, and he returned. So there's something about returning, church. When God does something good for you, you ought to return. When he delivers, some of y'all have been in some traps before. Soon as God delivers you, you ought to return back to your knees. Even when members of the church and society do things good for you, you ought to return at least with a phone call, at least with a letter, an email thanking them. There's something about, you all know Jesus in Luke chapter 17, he healed 10 lepers. 10. And how many returned? 1 leper returned. Why? Let me tell you, this is what I thought about in this lesson. I thought about the other 9. Why didn't the other 9 return? Now, I actually put this in my lesson. I said, well, this is meddling the church here. So I was going to say, which I'm not going, it's not in the lesson now, but I was going to say, I think I know why the 9 didn't return. And the answer lies right in here. And here's the meddling part I was going to put in the lesson. The same reason we don't return for Sunday night. Uh-oh. I'm getting back up here now. Because y'all, I think we might be on to something. The same reason we don't return Sunday night might be why the 9 didn't return. Think about it. Probably the number one reason we don't return Sunday night, I'm tired. That's a good one. That's a valid, I mean, people have good reasons, but maybe not valid, but they're good reasons. The reason I don't come back Sunday night is because I'm tired. What about I have to drive too far? Oh, it's getting quiet now. I knew. See, because some of y'all are already thinking, so maybe I have to go to work the next day. That's why I didn't come back Sunday night. By the way, it's not essential to salvation. Who says I have to come back on Sunday night? I can still go to heaven showing up right here, getting 2 hours of this message. It's not essential to salvation. Service too long. As a matter of fact, Brother Smith, you ought to be coming down for real this time, closing this thing out. I got you, see. Yeah, y'all, some of y'all have been turning, looking back there. I'm glad they put that clock way up there because I can see you when you turn. I'm looking at you. Yeah. Some of y'all sneaking down on your phones. You're not looking at this text. You're looking at the time. I thought Brother Williams was out of town. I'm just talking about why people don't return. That's all I'm talking about. Let's move on, though, so we can seriously get out of here. Continuing on, in verse 15, and he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him. And he said, behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now, therefore, I pray thee, take a blessing. That means you remember he brought something with him? That's a good sign, too. Sometimes you might not ought to go empty-handed. But he brought something with him. And here is Naaman, who has been healed of leprosy. He says, I brought something. I want you to take some money. Listen to this. Verse 16, but Elijah, he said, that's Elijah, as the Lord liveth, he takes a vow, before whom I stand, I will receive none. I don't want any of the money. That's understood, right? That's clear, plain, simple. Then he goes on and says, and he urged him to take it, but he refused. It's like, to me, it's kind of like you all have a lot of friends out there. Every time you go out to lunch or dinner, they always want to pick up the tab. And then you end up saying, well, no, I got it this time. And then they say, no, I've got it this time. And you go back and forth. And then you see them bring out the black credit card. And then you say, well, I'll let you have it this time and I'll get it. See, go back and forth. So here's this back and forth deal. I'm going back and forth. But it says he refused the money. See, God's healing is not for sale. That's what he's telling him. Next verse. Verse 17, and Naaman said, shall there not then, I pray thee, to be given thy servants 2 mules, burden of earth, for thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offering nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto the Lord. Drop down to verse 19. Verse 19 says, and he, that's Elijah, said unto him, Naaman, go in peace. So he departed from him a little way. See, he went just a little way. So here's Naaman, the man that's healed, right? Healed of leprosy. He's going just how far did he go? A little way. Think about that. He went, you know how they traveled back then? He just went a little way. He went a little way. And what happened? Next verse. The next verse is verse number 20. Verse 20 says, but Gehazi. So there's always a but Gehazi. When that man was healed, the money was refused. That should have been a period. That should have ended it. But there's always a but Gehazi. You've got somebody on your job right now. Everything was going smooth, but Gehazi. Sometimes in the family, you got a but Gehazi. You should have been a period. So look at this, but Gehazi. Look what happens. The servant of Elijah, the man of God, said, behold. Now, by the way, he's talking to himself. He's talking to himself now. It's okay to talk to yourself every once in a while. Let me tell you kind of what happens. See, you have this struggle, right? You got this self over here on this left shoulder right here. They're going to say, well, you need to do what's right. Don't be going down there. But on this shoulder right here, go ahead and go. Look and see what happened. You got this struggle. You always have a conscience. Here's the problem. You will run into a problem every time when you cut a deal with your conscience. Hey, go down there and feed the hungry. Don't go down there. Make a drive-by and see if their car is there. Don't drive by there because you might stop. Go into the liquor store and get, somebody said change, okay? Get some change. Don't go in there because if you go get the change, you might see something. You ain't gonna see nothing. You strong. You just listen to the sermon. And you know the title of the sermon is, you brought nothing in, you're going to take nothing out. You know that? Don't go. The problem you will have every time is when you make a deal with your conscience. And here's the deal. Conscience, if you don't bother me, I won't bother you. That's a bad deal right there. He's talking to himself, and listen to him. He says, the servant of God said, behold, my master has spared Naaman. He didn't take the money, this Syrian, in not receiving at his hand that which he brought. But as the Lord liveth, I will do what? I will do what? Give me a slide, by the way, I think, of some sandals here. I want to show you what they were wearing back then. They didn't have Nikes. They didn't have Adidas. They didn't have Reebok. Now here's a man saying, I'm going to run after him. How far did he get? The Bible said he's just got, see 183 here and MLK. He just got to Tannehill back here. He got a little way. 183. You know Tannehill's not that far, right? Let's go. So he says, I'm going to run after. Verse 21. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running after him, he lighted down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? Is everything okay? Now here's one thing as we close this lesson out. Whenever you act as if you don't understand, often it includes a lie. If you tell one lie, it's almost always accompanied by at least another one. Almost always. Can you think of the last time you told? It's like eating a Lay's potato chip. You can't just, is it all well? Next verse. Listen what he says. And he said, what? That's the first lie. That's the first lie. Because it's not all well. That's lie number one. Y'all keep track of the number of lies. He says, my master has sent me, saying, lie number two. Master ain't sent him nowhere. He's saying, behold, even now, just now, by the time you got from 183 to Tannehill, this just happened, is what he's saying. Even now, just now. He says, just now, there be come to me from Mount Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent. So give them some of that money you didn't give to Elijah. Lie number 4, verse number 23. And Naaman said, be content. 2 talents, take 2 talents. He urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments and laid them upon his servants, and they bare before him. Verse number 24. And when he came to the tower, he took them from their hands and bestowed them in the house, and he let the men go, and they departed. So now he's got the money. He said, y'all go about your business, and I'm going to hide this money, okay? That's a good plan, by the way, isn't it? Nobody saw him. He's in the clear. Verse 25, but he went in and stood before his master, and Elijah said unto him, whence cometh thou, Gehazi? In other words, where have you been? Where you been? I see your sandals are dusty, feet dusty, you're sweating, clothes wrinkled. Where you been? Now what is he going to say? In verse 26, and he said unto him, no, verse 25, but he went in and stood before his master, and Elijah said unto him, whence cometh thou, Gehazi? And this is what Gehazi said. Thy servant went nowhere. I didn't go anywhere. Children, don't try to fool your parents. They know when you've been somewhere. Some of them was there 25 years earlier. You can't fool them. They just didn't tell you they were there. Hard to fool them. So he says, I didn't go anywhere. That's another lie. So let's look at what happened. Verse 26, and he said unto him, went not my heart with thee When the man turned again from his chariot to meet thee, is it time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and men servants and maid servants? Verse 27, when you act like you don't understand, the leprosy therefore of Naaman shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from his presence a leper as white as snow, acting like you didn't understand. So there's a consequence, church, when you act like you don't understand. So we've said enough today. I appreciate your attention. And so now you know what the sermon was all about. You didn't bring anything in. You're not going to take anything out. And if God says the same, when we get up next time, we'll talk about moving day. Because there is a moving day. There is a moving day. So if you're here today and your heart, you feel in your heart that you need to make a change, this is the time to do it. The fact you didn't bring anything in, you're not going to take anything out, this is the time. In the Church of Christ, I learned early on, there is a plan of salvation. You have to first of all hear the word. Romans 10:17 talks about that. You have to believe it. Mark 16:15 and 16 clearly talks about believing. Then you have to confess. Matthew 10:32. You have to repent. Acts 2:38 talks about that. Then you have to be baptized. Acts 22:16 says, why tarrieth thou? Arise and be baptized. You want to know how you get rid of your sins? You have to wash them away. And if you're a member of the church, you know you need to change your life, or you need to ask for prayer. There's this opportunity. While we stand and sing the song of invitation, we want you to get your hearts ready, and if there's something on your heart, please make it known right now.
Learning to lean, I'm learning to lean. Yes, I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Yes, I'm finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Yes, I am learning to lean. I'm learning to lean. Yes, I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Yes, I'm finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Yes, I am learning to pray. I'm learning to pray. Yes, I'm learning to pray like Jesus. Well, I'm finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to pray like Jesus. Yes, I am learning to live. I'm learning to live. Yes, I'm learning to live like Jesus. Yes, I am finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to live like Jesus. Yes, I am learning to love. I'm learning to love. Yes, I'm learning to love through Jesus. Yes, I am finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to love through Jesus. Yes, I am learning to lean. I'm learning to lean. Yes, I'm learning to lean on Jesus. Yes, I am finding more power than I've ever dreamed. Yes, I'm learning to lean on